Imagine the scene. It is March 1918 in the humid, bustling harbor of Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. The world is consumed by the fire of the Great War, and the Atlantic is a hunting ground for German U-boats. Our main character is Lieutenant Commander George W. Worley, a 55-year-old career sailor with a reputation that borders on the deviant. Visualize Worley, an eccentric, polarizing figure, often seen walking the deck in his underwear and a hat, carrying a cane like a scepter of absolute command. He is the master of the USS Cyclops, a massive Proteus-class collier, a 540-foot steel monster designed to be a floating coal factory for the U.S. Navy. The power dynamic on the ship is a fragile circuit of military discipline and growing paranoia. Beside Worley are 305 souls, including crew members and passengers, such as the American Consul General Alfred Lewis Moreau Gottschalk. The mission is critical: transport over 10,000 tons of manganese, or heavy, dense mineral essential for making high-grade steel for the war effort. This is the primary behavioral data point: a ship loaded to its absolute technical limit, commanded by a man whose psychological stability is being questioned by his own officers. On February 22nd, the Cyclops hauls anchor and disappears into the blue, beginning a voyage that would lead to the largest non-combat loss of life in U.S. naval history. The archive is open. The timeline of the total biological exclusion of the Cyclops begins with the last sight of its massive masts fading into the tropical haze. Technical density: the USS Cyclops had a displacement of nearly 20,000 tons. The cargo of manganese ore was significantly denser than the coal it was designed to carry, lowering the ship's metacentric height and creating a severe technical risk for stability in rough seas. The barometric pressure in the South Atlantic was fluctuating, a sign of an approaching weather sabotage that Worley chose to ignore in favor of maintaining his rigid, self-imposed schedule. The investigation shifts to the technical audit of the cargo hold. Manganese ore is not just a mineral. It is a weight that defies maritime logic. 10,000 tons of it sat in the belly of the Cyclops like a stone heart. Unlike coal, which is light and fills the space, manganese is concentrated, creating a bottom-heavy center of gravity that puts immense stress on the ship's structural frame. This is the chemistry of the mystery. Visualize the workers in Rio, sweating under the summer sun, shoveling the dark or into the holds. The clinical reconstruction of the loading process shows that the ship was sitting deeper in the water than ever before. Worley was warned that the ship was overloaded, but the power dynamic of the captain's word was absolute. He dismissed the concerns with a severe, calculated arrogance. As the ship moved north, the heavy cargo acted as a silent internal sabotage. Every wave that hit the hull caused the steel to groan under a pressure it was never meant to sustain. The ship was no longer a vessel. It was a high-stakes physics experiment. Imagine the psychological state of the sailors, feeling the strange, sluggish vibration of the deck as the ship fought to right itself after every roll. The rastro of the manganese ore is the first forensic marker of a disaster waiting for a trigger. Technical density: manganese ore has a specific gravity of 7.2 to 7.4 compared to coal's 1.3 to 1.5. This created a concentrated load that focused the bending moment on the midsection of the hull. The ship was already suffering from a cracked cylinder in the starboard engine, reducing its propulsion capacity and making it technically crippled before it even reached the deeper waters of the North Atlantic crossing. The progression of the voyage reached a critical technical fracture on March 3, 1918. The Cyclops made an unscheduled stop in Barbados. Imagine the scene as the massive ship limps into the harbor, its starboard engine silent and dead. The technical audit reveals a massive crack in the engine cylinder, a mechanical failure that reduced the ship's speed to a mere 10 knots. This is a severe forensic data point. Worley was offered assistance, but he refused to allow any external repairs, claiming his crew could handle it. This is a behavioral trace of a man who feared losing control or exposing the messy and unsolved state of his command. The character of Gottschalk, the Consul General, was seen on the deck looking visibly concerned, a biological signal of impending dread. The ship took on additional water and supplies, but it did not offload any of the heavy ore. On March 4th, the Cyclops turned its bow toward Baltimore and sailed out into the open sea. This was the last time the ship, or any of the 306 people on board, would ever be seen by human eyes. Every maritime disappearance leaves a rastro, and here the rastro ends at the harbor mouth of Barbados. The power dynamic between Worley's ego and the ocean's reality had reached the point of no return. Technical density: the crack in the high-pressure cylinder of the starboard engine meant the ship was operating on a single screw. This significantly increased the vibration of the hull and reduced the ship's ability to maneuver in heavy swells. The meteorological reports for the route between Barbados and the Chesapeake Bay indicated a rapidly developing gale, a localized atmospheric sabotage that the crippled Cyclops was unprepared to face. Imagine the silence that follows. The USS Cyclops was equipped with state-of-the-art wireless radio technology for its time. It should have been able to send an SOS in a matter of seconds. But as the ship crossed into the waters that would later be known as the Bermuda Triangle, the radio went dead. There was no distress signal, no report of engine trouble, and no message of an attack. This is a total technical void. The ship simply vanished from the naval grid. The clinical reconstruction of the timeline suggests that the exclusion event occurred sometime around March 9th. The U.S. Navy waited for days, then weeks, for the collier to arrive in Baltimore. The silence became a psychological pressure that moved up the chain of command to the highest levels of the Pentagon. Was the ship taken by a German raider? Did the engine failure leave them drifting into the void? The forensic audit of the sea reveals that in 1918, the Atlantic was a place where a ship could be deleted without a trace. The lack of communication is the primary forensic marker of a catastrophe, so sudden that it allowed for zero human intervention. Technical density: the Cyclops was carrying a standard 2 kilowatt spark gap transmitter with an estimated range of 200 to 300 miles. The lack of a T signal, the distress signal used at the time, indicates that the power supply to the wireless room was likely severed instantly, or the ship capsized so rapidly that the operator was deleted before he could reach the key. This points to a catastrophic structural failure, rather than a slow sinking. The investigation shifts to the massive search effort that followed. The U.S. Navy launched every available ship and plane to scour the route from Barbados to the East Coast. Imagine the intense expressions of the sailors as they stare at the water for weeks, searching for any minute fragment, an empty lifeboat, a life jacket, or an oil slick. They found absolutely nothing. This is the most severe forensic marker of the case: the lack of a debris field. Every ship that sinks leaves a rastro of wood, oil, and personal belongings. But the Cyclops left nothing. It was a total atmospheric and biological deletion. We analyzed this through the mechanics of the ship's design. If the hull snapped under the weight of the manganese ore, the ship would have plummeted to the bottom in seconds. The heavy ore would have acted as an anchor, dragging everything, including the 306 souls, down to a depth of 3,000 feet before they could even scream. The search was officially called off in June. The Navy Department released a statement that will become legendary. The disappearance of this ship has been one of the most baffling mysteries in the annals of the Navy. Technical density: the search area covered over 100,000 square miles. The lack of an oil slick, which was common even for non-tanker ships of the era, suggests that the fuel bunkers remain intact as the ship sank, a technical indicator of a rapid vertical descent triggered by a major structural fracture in the ship's midsection. The investigation moves to the psychological profile of the man in command. After the disappearance, the Navy began a forensic audit of George W. Worley's life. They discovered a messy and unsolved past. Worley was born in Germany under the name Johann Friedrich Henry Herwig. He had changed his name and hidden his origins to join the Navy. In the height of World War I, this was a severe behavioral rastro of potential treason. Was the ship sabotaged from within? Did Worley hand a Cyclops over to a German submarine? We analyzed the character of Worley not as a traitor, but as a man of deep technical incompetence and overwhelming ego. The Worley file revealed that he was hated by his officers and known for cruel, erratic punishments. He once confined a sailor to a cage for a minor infraction. This is a behavioral trace of a deviant power dynamic. However, German records searched after the war revealed no knowledge of the Cyclops. There was no prize crew, no surrender, and no submarine attack. The traitor theory was a psychological deletion of the truth, that the ship was lost to the sea and the captain's own arrogance, not to the enemy. Technical density: surveillance of Worley's pre-war communications showed no links to German intelligence. However, his Germanic heritage was used as a convenient informational sabotage to explain the Navy's inability to find a ship. The Worley personality profile is now studied in naval academies as a primary example of how toxic leadership can compromise the safety of a high-tech military platform. To understand the deletion of the Cyclops, we must look at the molecular physics of its hull. The ship was one of 4 colliers in the Proteus class. In the years following the disappearance, two of its sister ships, the Nereus and the Proteus, also vanished in the Atlantic without a trace. This is a critical technical marker, a design flaw. Imagine the steel of the midsection, weakened by the corrosive nature of the cargo and the constant vibration of the cracked engine. The forensic reconstruction of the ship's architecture suggests a structural snap. When the ship hit the heavy gale north of Barbados, the heavy manganese were likely shifted in the hold. Imagine the sound of 10,000 tons of rock moving at once. The centrifugal force would have slammed into the side of the hull, exceeding the tensile strength of the rivets. In a single second, the ship would have buckled and snapped in two. This is the mechanics of a total deletion. The ship didn't sink. It transformed from a vessel into a plummeting rock. There was no time for a radio call, no time for lifeboats, and no time for hope. Technical density, modern stress-strain analysis on Proteus-class design shows a fatigue point at the junction of the central hold and the engine room. The addition of manganese, which is significantly more abrasive and corrosive than coal, likely accelerated the oxidation of the hull plates. In a state of beam C oscillation, the lateral force of the cargo would have created a torsional shear that the 1910-era welding and riveting were not engineered to withstand. The final minute-by-minute forensic reconstruction of Dossier 22 ends here. 306 lives deleted in a world at war, leaving a steel grave that has never been found. The trace left by the USS Cyclops is a lesson in the severe power of cargo sabotage and the fragility of a ship commanded by a broken mind. The biological facts are immutable: a massive ship gone, a crew lost, and a mystery that remains the deepest cold file in the history of the United States Navy. The Cyclops remains the definitive study in structural failure and the total deletion of identity in the zone of silence. Your mind is the final piece of this investigation. Join our community by clicking the subscribe button. Help us track the traces that the deep Atlantic tries to hide. I am your guide through the darkness, and I will return with a new dossier very soon. Keep your mind sharp. Focus on the facts with your eyes closed. And remember, the ocean is a master of secrets, but every rivet tells a story. This is Mind 74, and we are the keepers of the cold files. The investigation is suspended, but the sea remains silent. Until next time, technical density, the search for the Cyclops remains active in the private sector, utilizing modern side-scan sonar and ROV technology. To this date, no definitive wreckage has been identified. The biological exclusion of the 306 souls remains a permanent marker in the victimology of maritime history, serving as a reminder that technology is only as safe as the man who commands it.